My name is Daniel, and a couple of years ago, I thought I had finally found my dream home. It wasn't just the house itself that caught my eye, but the generous piece of land that came with it. You see, I've always been a bit of a road trip guy. I love the open highway, the freedom of being able to pack up and go wherever I wanted, and for that reason, I owned a shiny, well-kept RV. When I bought this house, one of the things that sold me was knowing I could park my RV on my own property just a few steps away from my front door. For me, it wasn't just a vehicle, it was a collection of memories. Trips across state lines, nights under the stars, camping with friends, and quiet mornings drinking coffee in the middle of nowhere. Parking it at my new home felt like keeping those memories close. It felt right, but apparently not everyone saw it that way. Entered the Homeowners Association. At first, I didn't think much about them. I knew the community had one, but I figured as long as I kept my yard clean, paid my dues, and didn't throw wild parties, they'd leave me alone. Oh, how wrong I was. Within a week of moving in, I got my first letter from the HOA. It was short and to the point. Remove the RV from your property immediately. It is a violation of community aesthetics. Community aesthetics. That was their way of saying they didn't like how my RV looked parked in my driveway. To me, it was ridiculous. I wasn't parking a rusted-out junk car or an eyesore. It was a beautiful RV, polished, maintained, and probably worth more than half the cars parked in the neighborhood. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just some automated notice. But then came another letter, and another. Soon after, fines were threatened. Then came the not-so-subtle visits. The HOA president herself, a woman named Karen Yes, her real name, showed up at my door one Saturday morning. She had that look on her face like she was about to scold a child for drawing on the walls. "You need to move that RV," she said sharply, pointing to my driveway like it was some kind of toxic waste. "This community has standards. It ruins the look of the neighborhood." I tried to keep calm. "With all due respect, it's my property. The RV is in perfect condition, and I don't see how it's anyone's business." Her eyes narrowed. "The HOA board disagrees. If you don't comply, we'll have no choice but to escalate. Daily fines. Possible legal action." Legal action. Over an RV parked on my own land. That was the first time I realized what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about rules, it was about control. Over the next few weeks, the harassment only got worse. I'd find passive-aggressive notes taped to my front door. Neighbors I hadn't even met yet would give me side-eye glances, clearly already influenced by the HOA gossip. Even caught someone taking pictures of my RV at night later. I learned it was one of the board members trying to build a case. At first, I was angry, really angry. The kind of anger that makes you want to storm into the next HOA meeting and flip the table. But I knew better. Rage rarely wins battles like these. Instead, I decided to think. To really think. If they hated the RV so much, maybe I could turn their hatred into something that worked for me. And that's when the idea came to me. I was sitting in the RV one evening, sipping a beer, scrolling on my laptop, when an Airbnb ad popped up. People were making side income by renting out treehouses, tiny homes, even converted school buses. That's when it hit me, what if my hated RV became something else entirely? What if it wasn't just a parked vehicle, but a luxury getaway? That was the night the plan was born. I spent the next couple of weeks transforming the RV new. Linens, cozy decor, soft lighting, even a small welcome basket for guests. I listed it on Airbnb as a luxury RV stay suburban escape with hotel comfort. The photos looked incredible. Honestly, it looked like something out of a magazine. At first, I wasn't sure if anyone would book. But within 48 hours, the calendar was filling up. Weekends, gone. Holidays, booked months in advance. And when the first guest left me a glowing 5-star review, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. The bookings just kept rolling in. The RV wasn't just a vehicle anymore, was a business. And within the first month, I'd earned more than the HOA's entire yearly dues from just that little slice of land they were so desperate to control. And that, my friends, is where the fun really began. The first month of my Airbnb experiment was like living in a dream. Guests came in, loved the setup, left glowing reviews, and kept recommending it to friends. I had couples booking it for anniversaries, solo travelers looking for a quiet retreat. Even a few business travelers who said it was more comfortable than the hotels in town. For me, it wasn't just the money though. Trust me, the money was good. It was the satisfaction. Every ping on my phone from the Airbnb app felt like a tiny victory against the HOA. But of course, the HOA noticed. It started small. The president, Karen, left another letter taped to my door. This one was different from the usual cold demands. It was longer, angrier, and written in a way that made it clear they knew something had changed. Operating a commercial business on residential property is strictly prohibited under community guidelines. Remove all advertisements and cease activity immediately. I remember holding that letter and laughing, 'cause here's the thing, they thought they had me cornered. But I had already done my homework. Short-term rentals in my state had special protections. Local laws actually allowed homeowners to rent out parts of their property, even within HOA communities, as long as they weren't breaking noise ordinances or causing safety issues. I wasn't doing either. My guests were quiet, respectful, and most of the neighbors didn't even notice them except the ones who were curious and came up to say, "So wait, you're renting this out?" That's genius. When Karen realized the usual scare tactics weren't working, she escalated. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find 3 members of the HOA board standing at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, glaring at the RV while winging at the RV. While when Karen realized when Karen realized the usual scare tactics weren't working. She escalated. When we Saturday send, wall walk wall. Why walk what? Wow wow wall why K-lie. We sound wive. We sound why wall with K's. We sound with K at play. By we are I. We is I y at all I we I. We say why we x I re say I they I seek I say I sticks it to cly I said I say it be I you kicks a couple was checking out. It looked like vultures circling roadkill. Karen barked, "This is unacceptable. You're turning this neighborhood into a motel?" The guests, bless their souls, just smiled, waved at me, and said, "Thanks again. Daniel, we'll be back next month," before driving off. The look on Karen's face when they said, "We'll be back," was priceless, like she had just bitten into a lemon. But the real turning point came a week later. I was mowing my lawn when my next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson, shuffled over. He's an older guy, retired, usually keeps to himself. I thought he was coming over to complain, but instead, he leaned on the fence and whispered, "My niece is visiting in a couple of weeks. Your RV available. She'd rather stay here than in a hotel." That's when I knew the tides were starting to turn. See, what the HOA didn't realize was that money talks. People in the neighborhood weren't mad about my RV. They were curious, even impressed. And when word spread that I was earning more from my little Airbnb setup than the HOA collected in dues for the entire year, people started asking themselves a dangerous question. Why are we letting these people boss us around? The HOA doubled down anyway. They started sending me certified letters, threatening massive fines, thousands of dollars a week. They even tried to claim my guests were trespassing. But here's the kicker. Every time they tried to threaten me with some vague rule, I went straight to the bylaws and pointed out the loophole. The HOA's own documents were sloppy. They never anticipated someone would use an RV this way. And their restrictions didn't cover short-term rentals. And then came the cherry on top. The HOA accidentally exposed themselves at the next community meeting, which I attended just to watch the fireworks. Karen went on a rant about how my RV business was destroying the integrity of the neighborhood. That's when one of the quieter board members, clearly fed up, muttered under his breath but loud enough for people to hear, "Integrity. Half this board's been renting out their lake houses on Airbnb for years." You could feel the room shift. Neighbors turned, eyebrows raised, and suddenly it wasn't just me versus the HOA anymore. It was me versus a bunch of hypocrites. That was the beginning of their unraveling. If part 2 was about the HOA realizing they were losing control, part 3 was when they went from annoyed to flat-out desperate. And when desperate people make decisions, they usually make stupid ones. It started with the legal threats. One morning, I received a thick envelope in the mail, stuffed with papers that looked official. Big bold letters across the top, notice of intent to pursue legal action. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through page after page of nonsense. According to them, I was running an illegal hotel, disturbing the peace, devaluing property values, and even, get this, endangering children because guests might attract criminal behavior. Endangering children. From a luxury RV with fresh linens and a basket of complimentary snacks? Please. I could have panicked. A lot of homeowners do when an HOA throws legal jargon at them. That's their game, scare you into submission. But I didn't panic. I called a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, my cousin Mark, who just happened to specialize in property law. Mark looked at the documents and chuckled. "Daniel, half of this wouldn't hold up in small claims court, let alone a real lawsuit. They're bluffing. The only thing they're proving is they don't understand their own bylaws." That gave me confidence. But here's where it gets even better. At the very next HOA meeting, Karen came in swinging. She brought up my RV within the first 5 minutes, waving papers around like she was about to personally evict me. This man is violating our rules. He's operating a commercial business. He's lowering property values. But before she could keep going, I stood up, calm, collected, and holding my own folder. "With all due respect, Karen, I've reviewed the bylaws. Nowhere does it prohibit short-term rentals. Nowhere does it say an RV, in good condition, can't be parked on private property. And as for property values, why don't we talk about how several of you are already profiting off short-term rentals at your lake houses?" The room went silent. Karen's face turned red. That's different," she stammered. "Different how?" I asked, letting the question hang in the air. You could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads. Neighbors started whispering, exchanging glances, realizing the hypocrisy. And then came the knockout punch, not from me, but from the very people Karen thought she controlled. A neighbor named Lisa, who had booked the RV for her sister's visit, stood up and said, "Honestly, I think Daniel's RV is a brilliant idea. My sister loved it. It's quiet, it's clean, and it's not bothering anyone. Why is the HOA spending all its time and money attacking something that's actually positive?" The room buzzed with agreement. People nodded, some even clapped, for the first time. The HOA wasn't the authority, they were on the defensive. Karen tried to regain control, pounding her fist on the table. "This is a violation. We will pursue this legally." But it was too late. The tide had turned. People weren't scared anymore. They were questioning why their dues were funding petty crusades instead of real improvements in the neighborhood. And here's where things really blew up. A week later, I received a letter not from the HOA, but from a local journalist. Word had gotten out about the feud, and apparently the story of HOA versus RV Airbnb was too juicy to ignore. They wanted to interview me when the article came out. It painted the HOA as power-hungry bullies trying to crush a homeowner's harmless side hustle. The headline was brutal. HOA attacks local man's Airbnb. Men meant neighbors call out hypocrisy. The board members hated it. But guess who loved it? The community. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact were now waving, stopping to chat, even asking if they could book the RV for their relatives at that point. The HOA's credibility was crumbling, and Karen was losing her grip. But she wasn't done yet. No, she was about to make her biggest mistake of all. Because when people lose power, they do desperate, reckless things. And Karen, she was about to cross a line she could never uncross. By now, the RV wasn't just surviving the HOA's attacks, it was thriving. Bookings were pouring in faster than I could manage. My guests were leaving glowing reviews. And my neighbors, many of them once skeptical, were now openly supporting me, and that drove Karen absolutely insane. Koi could almost see the steam coming out of her ears every time she drove past my house. It didn't matter that my yard was immaculate. The RV was spotless, and my guests were respectful. To her, the simple fact that I was winning meant she was losing, and she wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I noticed something odd. A bright orange sticker slapped across the side of my RV. In bold black letters it read, "Violation vehicle, subject to tow." I peeled it off, baffled. A tow, on my own property. The next morning, the mystery solved itself. A massive tow truck rolled into the neighborhood, rumbling right up to my driveway. Two men in reflective vests hopped out, looking ready to hook my RV and haul it away. "Hold up!" I shouted, storming outside. "What do you think you're doing?" "Got an order from the HOA," one of them said. "This RV's gotta go." I laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full, disbelieving laugh. "This is private property. You tried to tow this RV and you'll be trespassing. In fact, let me make a quick call." I pulled out my phone and dialed the police non-emergency line. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up. The officer listened to both sides, then shook his head at the tow truck guys. "Unless you've got a court order, you're not towing anything off his property. Pack it up." The tow truck rumbled away, and I stood there, grinning, while Karen, who had been lurking at the end of the street, arms crossed, looked like she might actually explode. But here's the thing about people like Karen. When one scheme fails, they always try another. 2 days later, I woke up to find a letter taped to my door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was anonymous, typed up. But I could tell exactly where it came from. "Your guests are not safe. The neighborhood doesn't want them here. Stop now, or things will get worse." That was the line. The moment they crossed from harassment into threats, I wasn't about to let it slide. I installed extra security cameras, made sure every inch of my property was covered, and even let my guests know what was going on. Surprisingly, instead of scaring people away, it made them more supportive. One guest, a police officer visiting from another state, Evie, left me a review that said, "Safe, quiet, and one of the most relaxing stays I've ever had. I'll be back." And then came Karen's final, fatal mistake. She tried to file a complaint with the city, claiming my RV was a health hazard. But when the city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, he did a full walkthrough of the RV. He checked everything: smoke detectors, plumbing, electricity, even the emergency exits. At the end, he looked impressed. "This is cleaner and safer than half the apartments I inspect," he told me. Then, with a smirk, he added, "Honestly, I might book a weekend here myself." When the report came back, it didn't just say the RV was compliant. It praised the setup as an innovative and well-maintained short-term rental option. Karen had officially lost, but the real climax was still to come, the moment the entire neighborhood turned on the HOA. And the board's power collapsed in front of everyone. And that moment, oh, it was glorious. By the time the city inspector gave my RV a glowing report, the writing was already on the wall. The HOA had lost, but they didn't know it yet. They still thought they had some kind of power left, that maybe if they pushed hard enough, they could force me to cave. So, at the next HOA meeting, Karen tried to rally one last stand. She called it an emergency session, claiming that my RV was destroying the neighborhood's reputation and that drastic action was needed. The room was packed that night. More neighbors showed up than I had ever seen at a meeting before. Some came out of curiosity, others because they were sick of the drama, and a good handful because they secretly or not so secretly supported me. Karen stood at the front like a dictator addressing her kingdom, voice sharp and loud. This man has disrespected our community, violated our rules, and refused to listen. If we let him get away with this, what's next? Junkyards and driveways, loud parties every weekend. This neighborhood will become chaos if we don't act now. She slammed her hand on the podium for effect. But instead of applause or support, the room went quiet. Dead quiet. And then, one by one, people began speaking up. Lisa, the neighbor who had booked the RV for her sister, stood and said, "Daniel's guests are quieter than some of my actual neighbors. They don't cause trouble. They don't litter." Frankly, the only chaos here is this HOA wasting our time and money on something that isn't even against the law. Mr. Thompson, the older retired guy, added, "I've lived here 20 years. This RV hasn't lowered property values, it's made people curious about the neighborhood. My niece stayed there and said it was one of the nicest experiences she's ever had. You're attacking the wrong person." Others chimed in too. Some clapped, a few booed Karen directly, and then came the fatal blow. One neighbor, who had clearly had enough, stood and asked, "Karen, how much of our HOA budget have you spent on this fight? On letters, legal fees, and towing companies? Because I sure don't see new landscaping or community events anymore." Room erupted. People demanded answers. Karen tried to dodge, tried to deflect, but it was obvious she had been using HOA funds to fuel her personal vendetta by the end of the night. The board had no choice but to call for a vote of confidence. And let's just say, the confidence wasn't there. Karen and two of her allies were voted out on the spot. I didn't even have to say much. The community did the work for me. From that day on, the harassment stopped. The RV remained proudly parked in my driveway, and my Airbnb business kept thriving. In fact, it's got even better because now I wasn't just the guy with the RV. I was the guy who stood up to the HOA and won. Some neighbors even came to me afterward, asking for advice on how they could use their properties in creative ways. 2. A guest house, a basement rental, even backyard glamping setups. It was like the RV had sparked something bigger than just my own fight, inspired others to stop being afraid of the HOA's empty threats. And Karen, last I heard, she moved to another neighborhood. Hopefully one without an HO, although I kinda doubt she could resist trying to run another one into the ground. As for me, well, I got the last laugh. I turned their harassment into one of the best decisions of my life. What started as an RV they hated became a business they couldn't shut down. One that outturned their entire annual budget and gave me a kind of freedom they couldn't touch. And the best part? Every time I get a new booking notification on my phone, I remember those first angry letters, those threats, those meetings, and I smile. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back with anger. It's outsmarting the people who think they control you. So, what's the lesson here? Simple: when life throws roadblocks in your way, Don't just fight them head-on. Think bigger. Get creative. Turn the obstacle into an opportunity. Because the sweetest victories aren't just about winning, they're about turning someone else's power trip into your success story. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment about your own HOA nightmare or, better yet, how you turned a problem into a win. Until next time, stay strong, stay clever, and don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do on your own property.